Before Pierce Brosnan became James Bond, he had already lost almost everything that mattered. Long before the Aston Martin, the tuxedo and the license to kill, there was a young Irish actor trying to find his place in the world. At 16, he walked into a theatre arts lab in South London. He didn't know it yet, but that small room was the beginning of a very different life. A few years later, that dream carried him across the Atlantic. Then came Remington Steele, and suddenly people everywhere knew his face. But while his career was rising, his personal life was taking a much heavier turn. His wife, actress Cassandra Harris, had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer. For Pierce, she wasn't simply his wife. He was the person who had shared the difficult years before the world knew his name. And in December 1991, that life changed forever. Cassandra was gone. Pierce was left to face grief while raising a family. And then, just 4 years later, something almost impossible happened. The role Cassandra had once hoped he would play finally became his. The world saw James Bond, but behind the tuxedo was a man still carrying a loss. Then in 1994, while Pierce was still carrying the weight of his past, he met someone who would change his future. Her name was Kelly Shea Smith, and unlike the glamorous world surrounding Pierce, their relationship began quietly. There was no red carpet, no cameras, no James Bond. Just two people discovering that life might still have something beautiful left to give. But Pierce's life was about to become even more complicated, because while his heart was beginning to heal, his career was reaching a level he had once only dreamed about. He was about to become James Bond. For millions of people, he was the perfect Bond. But the man behind the character knew something the audience didn't. Fame could fill a theater, it couldn't fill an empty chair at home. And Pierce had no intention of pretending that his past had disappeared. Instead, he carried those memories with him. And slowly, the relationship with Kelly became something much deeper. She wasn't trying to replace the life he'd lost. She was helping him build a new one. 7 years after they first met, Pierce and Kelly finally married. It wasn't the beginning of a fairy tale. It was the beginning of something much more real. Because Pierce had already learned that life can change in a single moment, and he wasn't about to waste the second chance he'd been given. By then, Pierce Brosnan's life looked very different from the one he had imagined as a young actor. He had survived the loss of his first wife, found love again, and built a new family. And perhaps most importantly, he had found a place where he didn't have to be James Bond. At home, he was simply a husband and a father. But Hollywood never stays completely outside the front door. The cameras followed them, the headlines followed them, and so did the expectations. But through it all, they kept choosing the same thing: each other. Then came another painful chapter. In 2013, Pierce lost his daughter Charlotte to ovarian cancer. It was a devastating reminder of loss he had experienced more than 2 decades earlier. But once again, he kept moving forward, not because the pain disappeared, but because he learned how to carry it, and Kelly remained beside him. For decades, their relationship has continued away from the fantasy of Hollywood. No perfect Hollywood script could have written what came next, because their story was never really about fame. It was about surviving what life took away, while still having the courage to love what remained. And perhaps that's why their story still resonates, because everyone understands what it means to lose someone, and everyone hopes that life still has another chapter waiting. For Pierce Brosnan, that second chapter didn't erase the first. He simply learned to live with all of it. The actor became a Bond legend, but the man chose something even more important: a life he could actually call his own. Today, Pierce Brosnan is no longer simply remembered as James Bond. He is an actor, an artist, a producer, an environmentalist, and a husband who has spent decades building a life away from the spotlight. And some of that work has been done alongside Kelly. Their shared passion for the environment became one of the foundations of their life together. Together, they even produced a documentary about environmental problems affecting native Hawaiian communities. For Pierce, creativity became another way of expressing everything he had experienced. The memories, the losses, the love, the years he could never get back. Perhaps that's why his story feels different from the usual Hollywood success story. Because the greatest role he ever played wasn't written by Hollywood. It was simply learning how to live after losing the people he loved, and somehow still choosing love. 25 years after their wedding, Pierce and Kelly reached another remarkable milestone together. 25 years of marriage, more than 3 decades since they first met. And through every chapter, their relationship remained rooted in friendship, respect, and companionship. And maybe that's the real lesson hidden behind the James Bond legend. The world may remember the man with the license to kill, but behind that character was a man who knew what it meant to lose, and what it meant to find love again. And perhaps that's why, after all these years, the story still matters, because life doesn't always give us the ending we planned. Sometimes it gives us something completely different. And sometimes the most beautiful chapter begins after you thought the story was already over. Pierce Brosnan became James Bond, but perhaps his greatest story was becoming Pierce Brosnan. And sometimes surviving the story is the greatest role of all.